Chapter 6. There. Was someone crying? There was. The next day, the rain poured down in torrents again. When Mary looked out of her window, the moor was almost completely hidden by gray mist and clouds. Going outside today was out of the question.
"What do you do in your cottage when it rains like this?" she asked Martha. "We mostly just try to stay out of each other's way."
Martha answered.
"Oh, it really feels like there are a lot of us then. Mother is a good-tempered woman, but she gets completely overwhelmed. The oldest ones go out to the cowshed and play there. Dickon doesn't mind the wet at all. He goes out just the same as if the sun was shining. He says he sees things on rainy days that don't show when the weather is nice. Once he found a little fox cub half drowned in its hole, and he brought it home inside his shirt to keep it warm. Its mother had been killed nearby, the hole was flooded, and the rest of the litter was dead. He still has it at home now. Another time he found a half-drowned young crow and brought it home too and tamed it. He named it Soot because it's so black, and it hops and flies around with him everywhere."
By this time, Mary had forgotten to resent Martha's familiar way of talking. She had even begun to find it interesting, and she felt sorry when Martha stopped talking or went away. The stories her ayah had told her in India were completely different from the ones Martha told about the moorland cottage. That cottage housed 14 people who lived in 4 tiny rooms and never had quite enough to eat. The children seemed to tumble around and amuse themselves like a litter of energetic, good-natured collie puppies. Mary was drawn most of all to the mother and Dickon. Whenever Martha told stories about what her mother said or did, they always sounded warm and comforting. "If I had a raven or a fox cub, I could play with it," Mary said. "But I have nothing." Martha looked puzzled.
"Can you knit?"
she asked. "No," Mary answered.
"Can you sew?"
"No."
"Can you read?"
"Yes."
"Then why don't you read something or practice your spelling? You're old enough to be learning from books by now."
"I don't have any books," Mary said. "The ones I had were left in India."
"That's a pity,"
Martha said.
"If Mrs. Medlock would let you go into the library, there are thousands of books in there."
Mary didn't ask where the library was because she was suddenly struck by a new idea. She made up her mind to go and find it herself. She wasn't worried about Mrs. Medlock, who seemed to spend all her time in her comfortable housekeeper's sitting room downstairs. In this strange place, you hardly ever saw anyone. In fact, there was no one to see but the servants. When their master was away, they lived a comfortable life downstairs. There was a huge kitchen decorated with polished brass and pewter, and a large servants' hall where they ate 4 or 5 hearty meals every day. A lot of lively fun went on there when Mrs. Medlock was out of the way. Mary's meals were served regularly, and Martha waited on her, but nobody paid any attention to her. Mrs. Medlock came to check on her every day or two, but no one asked what she was doing or told her what to do. She figured this was probably the English way of raising children. In India, she had always been attended by her ayah, who followed her everywhere and waited on her hand and foot. Mary had often grown tired of her company. Now, nobody followed her at all, and she was learning to dress herself because Martha looked at her as if she were silly and stupid whenever she wanted things handed to her and put on.
"Don't you have any common sense?"
Martha had said once, when Mary just stood there waiting for her to put on her gloves.
"Our Susan Ann is twice as sharp as you, and she's only 4 years old. Sometimes you look completely soft in the head."
Mary had scowled crossly for an hour after that, but it made her think about several entirely new things. This morning, she stood at the window for about 10 minutes after Martha had swept the hearth one last time and gone downstairs. She was thinking about the new idea that had come to her when she heard about the library. She didn't care much about the library itself, since she had read very few books, but hearing about it brought back the thought of those 100 rooms with closed doors. She wondered if they were all really locked, and what she would find if she could get into any of them. Were there really 100 rooms? Why shouldn't she go and see how many doors she could count? It would give her something to do on a morning when she couldn't go outside. She had never been taught to ask permission to do things, and she knew nothing about rules or authority, so it wouldn't have occurred to her to ask Mrs. Medlock if she could walk around the house, even if she had run into her. She opened the door and stepped out into the corridor, and so her wanderings began. It was a long corridor that branched into others, leading her up short flights of stairs that connected to even more passages. There were doors everywhere, and pictures hung on the walls. Sometimes they were dark, strange landscapes, but most of them were portraits of men and women in grand, old-fashioned costumes made of satin and velvet. She found herself in a long gallery where the walls were covered with these portraits. She had never imagined there could be so many pictures in a single house. As she walked slowly down the gallery, she stared at the faces, and they seemed to stare right back at her. She felt as if they were wondering what a little girl from India was doing in their home. Some of the pictures were of children, little girls in stiff satin dresses that reached the floor and flared out around them, and boys with puffed sleeves, lace collars, and long hair, or with large ruffles around their necks. She stopped to look at every child, wondering what their names were, where they had gone, and why they wore such strange clothes. One portrait showed a stiff, plain-looking little girl who looked rather like Mary herself. She wore a green brocade dress and held a green parrot on her finger. Her eyes had a sharp, curious expression. "Where do you live now?" Mary said aloud to her. "I wish you were here." Surely no other little girl had ever spent such a strange morning. It felt as if there was no one in the entire sprawling house but her own small self. She wandered upstairs and downstairs, through narrow passages and wide halls, where it seemed like no one else had ever walked. Since the house had so many rooms, people must have lived in them once, but now it all felt so empty that she could hardly believe anyone ever had. It wasn't until she climbed to the second floor that she thought about trying a doorknob. All the doors were shut, just as Mrs. Medlock had said. But finally, she placed her hand on one of the handles and turned it. She felt a brief flutter of fear when the knob turned easily. When she pushed, the heavy door swung open slowly. It was a massive door, leading into a large bedroom. Embroidered tapestries hung on the walls, and the room was filled with the kind of decorated, inlaid furniture she had seen in India. A wide window with leaded glass panes looked out onto the moor, and over the fireplace hung another portrait of the stiff, plain little girl, who seemed to stare at her more curiously than ever. "Perhaps she slept here once," Mary said. "She stares at me so much, she makes me feel strange." After that, she opened door after door. She saw so many rooms that she began to tire, starting to believe there really were 100 of them, even though she hadn't counted. In every room, there were old paintings or tapestries showing strange scenes. Almost all of them contained unique furniture and curious ornaments. One room, which looked like a lady's sitting room, had walls draped in embroidered velvet. Inside a cabinet stood about 100 little elephants carved from ivory. They were all different sizes. Some carried riders or covered carriage seats on their backs. A few were quite large, while others were so tiny they looked like babies. Having seen carved ivory in India, Mary knew all about elephants. She opened the cabinet door, stood on a footstool, and played with them for a long time. When she grew tired, she arranged them neatly and closed the cabinet door. In all her wanderings through the long corridors and empty rooms, she had seen nothing alive until she entered this room. Just after she closed the cabinet door, she heard a tiny rustling sound. It made her jump. She looked around at the sofa near the fireplace, where the sound seemed to come from. In the corner of the sofa lay a cushion. There was a hole in its velvet cover, and out of the hole peeped a tiny head with a pair of frightened eyes. Mary crept softly across the room to take a closer look. The bright eyes belonged to a little gray mouse. She had chewed a hole into the cushion and made a cozy nest inside. 6 baby mice were cuddled up asleep next to her. Even if there was no one else alive in those 100 rooms, these 7 mice didn't look lonely at all. "If they wouldn't be so scared, I would take them back with me," Mary said. She had wandered around long enough to feel too tired to go any further, so she turned back. She lost her way 2 or 3 times by turning down the wrong corridors, forcing her to wander up and down until she found the right path. Finally, she made it back to her own floor, though she was still some distance from her room and didn't know exactly where she was. "I think I've made a wrong turn again," she said, standing still at the end of a short passage, with tapestries on the wall. I don't know which way to go, how quiet everything is. As she stood there, just after she spoke, the silence was broken by a sound. It was another cry, though not quite like the one she had heard the night before. This was short, a fretful, childish whine, muffled by the thick walls. It's closer than it was, Mary said, her heart beating a little faster. And someone really is crying. She accidentally placed her hand on the tapestry near her, then jumped back in surprise. The tapestry was actually covering a door, which swung open to reveal another section of the corridor. Walking toward her was Mrs. Medlock, a bunch of keys in her hand and a very angry look on her face.
What are you doing here?
Mrs. Medlock demanded, grabbing Mary's arm and pulling her away.
What did I tell you?
I took a wrong turn, Mary explained. I didn't know which way to go, and I heard someone crying. She absolutely detested Mrs. Medlock at that moment, and she hated her even more a second later.
You didn't hear anything of the sort.
The housekeeper snapped.
Get back to your own nursery, or I'll box your ears.
She grabbed Mary by the arm and half pushed, half pulled her up one passage and down another, until she shoved her through the door of her own room.
Now,
Mrs. Medlock said,
you stay where you're told, or you'll find yourself locked in. The master had better get you a governess, just like he said he would. You're someone who needs a close eye kept on her, and I've got enough to do already.
She marched out of the room and slammed the door behind her. Mary sat down on the hearth rug, pale with rage. She didn't cry, but she ground her teeth in anger. There was someone crying, there was. She whispered to herself. She had heard it twice now, and sooner or later, she would find out the truth. She had discovered a great deal this morning. She felt as if she had been on a long journey, and at least she had found things to keep her entertained. She had played with the ivory elephants, and she had seen the gray mouse and her babies cozy in their velvet cushion nest. Chapter 7: The Key to the Garden. 2 days later, the moment Mary opened her eyes, she sat straight up in bed and called out to Martha. Look at the moor, look at the moor. The rainstorm was over. During the night, the wind had swept away the gray mist and clouds, and then died down completely. Now a brilliant, deep blue sky stretched high over the moorland. Mary had never imagined a sky could be so blue. In India, the skies were always hot and blazing. This sky was a deep, cool blue that seemed to sparkle like the water of a beautiful, bottomless lake. High up in the blue arch, small, snow-white clouds floated like fluffy fleece. The vast moor itself looked soft and blue now, instead of its usual gloomy purple-black or dreary gray.
Yes,
Martha said with a cheerful grin.
the storm is over for now. It often does this at this time of year. It clears up in a single night, as if pretending it was never here and never planned to return. That is because spring is on its way. It is still a long way off, but it is coming.
I thought maybe it always rained, or looked dark in England. Mary said.
Oh no.
Martha said, sitting up on her heels among her polishing brushes.
Nothing of the sort.
What does that mean? Mary asked seriously. In India, the local people spoke different dialects that only a few understood, so she was not surprised when Martha used words she did not know. Martha laughed, just as she had on their first morning together.
There now.
She said.
I am speaking broad Yorkshire again, even though Mrs. Medlock told me not to. Nought of the sort means nothing of the sort.
She explained slowly and carefully.
But it takes so much longer to say it that way. Yorkshire is the sunniest place on earth when the sun does shine. I told you that you would like the moor after a while. Just wait until you see the golden gorse blossoms, the yellow broom and the purple bells of the heather. There will be hundreds of butterflies fluttering, bees humming and skylarks soaring up and singing. You will want to go out there at sunrise and spend the whole day on the moor, just like Dickon does.
Could I ever go there? Mary asked wistfully, looking out the window at the distant blue. It looked so new, vast, and wonderful, and the color was simply heavenly.
I don't know.
Martha answered.
It seems to me you have never really used your legs since the day you were born. You couldn't walk 5 miles, and it is 5 miles to our cottage.
I would like to see your cottage. Martha stared at her curiously for a moment before picking up her polishing brush to rub the fireplace grate again. She noticed that Mary's small, plain face did not look nearly as sour now as it had on the first morning. It looked a little like her sister Susan Ann's face when she wanted something very much.
I will ask my mother about it.
Martha said.
She is the kind of person who can almost always find a way to get things done. Today is my day off and I am going home. Oh, I am so glad. Mrs. Medlock has a lot of respect for my mother. Maybe she can talk to her.
I like your mother. Mary said.
I should think you would.
Martha agreed, polishing away. I have never seen her. Mary said.
No, you haven't.
Martha replied. She sat back on her heels again and rubbed the tip of her nose with the back of her hand, looking puzzled for a moment. But then she spoke with absolute certainty.
Well, she is so sensible, hard-working, good-natured and clean that no one could help liking her, whether they have seen her or not. When I go home to her on my day off, I literally jump for joy while crossing the moor.
I like Dickon too. Mary added. And I have never seen him, either.
Well,
Martha said stoutly.
I told you that the birds, the rabbits, the wild sheep, the ponies, and even the foxes like him. I wonder.
She added, staring at Mary thoughtfully.
What Dickon would think of you.
He wouldn't like me. Mary said in her stiff, cold little way. No one likes me. Martha looked thoughtful again.
How do you like yourself?
She asked, sounding genuinely curious. Mary hesitated for a moment and thought about it. Not at all, really. She answered. But I never thought of that before. Martha grinned a little, remembering a family story.
My mother said that to me once.
Martha said.
She was working at her washtub, and I was in a terrible mood complaining about everyone. She turned around and said to me, "You young vixen, there you stand, saying you do not like this person and you do not like that person. How do you like yourself?" It made me laugh and it brought me to my senses in an instant.
She left in high spirits as soon as she had served Mary breakfast. She was going to walk 5 miles across the moor to the cottage, help her mother wash clothes, do the weekly baking, and enjoy herself thoroughly. Once Martha left, Mary felt lonelier than ever. She hurried out into the garden, and the first thing she did was run around the fountain flower garden 10 times. She counted the laps carefully, and by the time she finished, she felt much better. The sunshine transformed the entire landscape. The high, deep blue sky arched over Misselthwaite Manor just as it did over the moor. She kept tilting her head back to look up at it, trying to imagine what it would feel like to lie on one of those fluffy white clouds and float away. She walked into the first kitchen garden and found Ben Weatherstaff working with 2 other gardeners. The beautiful weather seemed to have put him in a better mood, and he actually spoke to her first.
Spring is coming.
He said.
Can't you smell it?
Mary sniffed the air and thought she could. I smell something nice, fresh and damp. She said.
That is the good, rich earth.
He answered, digging away.
It is in a good mood, getting ready to grow things. It is always glad when planting time comes. The earth gets bored in the winter when there is nothing to do. In the flower gardens out there, things are starting to stir down in the dark. The sun is warming them up. Before long, you will see little green spikes poking out of the black soil.
What will they be? Mary asked.
Crocuses, snowdrops, and daffodils. Have you never seen them?
No, in India, everything is hot, wet, and green after the rains. Mary said. And I think things grow up overnight.
These won't grow up overnight.
Weatherstaff said.
You will have to wait for them. They will poke up a little higher here, push out a new shoot there, and uncurl a leaf one day and another the next. Just watch them.
I am going to. Mary answered. Soon, she heard the soft rustle of wings and knew instantly that the robin had returned. He was very lively and bold, hopping around close to her feet. He tilted his head to one side and looked at her so slyly that she decided to ask Ben Weatherstaff a question. Do you think he remembers me? She asked.
Remembers you.
Weatherstaff said indignantly.
He knows every cabbage stump in these gardens, let alone the people. He has never seen a little girl here before, and he is determined to find out all about you. There is no use trying to hide anything from him.
Are things stirring down in the dark in the garden where he lives? Mary asked.
What garden?
Grunted Weatherstaff, turning grumpy again. The one with the old rose trees. She could not help asking, because she wanted to know so badly. Are all the flowers dead, or do some of them come back in the summer? Are there ever any roses?
Ask him.
Ben Weatherstaff said, gesturing with his shoulders toward the robin.
He is the only one who knows. No one else has seen inside it for 10 years.
10 years was a long time, Mary thought. She had been born exactly 10 years ago. She walked away, thinking slowly. She had begun to like the garden, just as she had begun to like the robin, Dickon, Martha's mother, and even Martha herself. That seemed like a lot of people to like, especially for someone who wasn't used to liking anyone. She even counted the robin as one of those people. She went for a walk outside the long, ivy-covered wall where she could see the treetops. The second time she walked up and down, something incredibly exciting and interesting happened to her, and it was all because of Ben Weatherstaff's robin. She heard a chirp and a twitter. Looking at the bare flower bed to her left, she saw him hopping around, pretending to peck at the soil to convince her he hadn't followed her. But she knew he had, and the surprise filled her with so much joy that she actually trembled a little. You do remember me? She cried out. You do, you are prettier than anything else in the world. She chirped, talked, and coaxed him while he hopped, flicked his tail, and twittered back. It felt exactly as if they were having a conversation. His red breast looked like bright satin, and he puffed it out, looking so grand, handsome, and proud. It was as if he were showing her just how important and human-like a robin could be. Mary completely forgot that she had ever been a cross or stubborn child. She stepped closer and closer, bending down to talk to him and trying to imitate his robin sounds. Oh, to think that he would actually let her get that close. He knew she would never reach out to grab him or startle him in the slightest way. He knew it because he behaved like a real person, only much nicer than any human in the world. She was so happy she barely dared to breathe. The flower bed was not entirely bare. It had no flowers because the perennial plants had been cut back for the winter, but there were tall and short shrubs growing together at the back of the bed. As the robin hopped under them, Mary saw him hop over a small pile of freshly turned-up soil. He stopped there to look for a worm. The earth had been dug up because a dog had been trying to catch a mole, leaving a fairly deep hole in the ground. Mary looked at the hole, not knowing why it was there, and noticed something half buried in the fresh soil. It looked like a ring of rusty iron or brass. When the robin flew up into a tree nearby, she reached down and picked it up. She realized it was more than just a ring. It was an old key, and it looked as if it had been buried in the ground for a very long time. Mary stood up, staring at the key hanging from her finger with a look of pure wonder and slight fear. Perhaps it has been buried for 10 years. She whispered. Perhaps it is the key to the garden.